Hi friends, I'm Abby and welcome back to my channel. Today I'm going to be doing my July wrap up and talking through all of the books that I read in the month of July. So in the month of July I read 6 books coming to a total of 2,868 pages. 5 of the books were fantasy, 1 was romance, 5 were adult and 1 was YA. And then in terms of star ratings, 1 was 4.5 stars, 2 were 4 stars, 2 were sort of 3.5, 3.75, and then 1 3 star. So mostly positive, but not like stand out. No 5 stars, unfortunately. I started 2 series, which I believe puts my on the go at 29. So I am creeping up a little bit. So I do need to start working on bringing that back down, back into the lower 20s where it belongs. And in terms of what I got up to, it was my birthday month. I turned the grand old age of 30, and for that me and my partner went to Chicago for a few days. So that was lovely, you know, experiencing the city, going having a holiday. Yeah, saw lots of beautiful sights, went did a lot of walking, just got out and about and did a lot of fun things. I think that was the highlight of the month. Aside from that, I saw my parents a few times and family, whether that was back at my parents or in London, did both. Generally had, I'd say, a pretty positive month. The weather has been mostly quite good for a London summer. That it's been we've had a bit of ups and downs, but it's been generally pretty good, which is nice. We're now into August and I'm a little bit behind, I'd say, in filming this, but better late than never, it's coming. So I will run through some of the books that all of the books that I read over the past month. So 2 of the books you will have already seen mentioned in my reading my subscribers recommendations video, which went up just before this. So for those 2 books, if you want more full thoughts, then they will be in that vlog as I detailed my experience reading them. But in quick summary, at the beginning of the month I read Raybearer by Jordan Fueko, which is the first book in a YA fantasy duology, which centres our main character, who as a young child is tasked by her mother, or compelled by her mother, to murder this prince. She doesn't know why, and she enters into into the castle, and she's training with him, and she's conflicted with the desire of, do I kill him, do I not? I'm sort of compelled to. It did sort of break my expectations a little bit. I enjoyed the world building, but I'm not compelled enough to keep going with this. But with this series, that I think for me and my tastes, I'd have preferred it if I had read this when I was part of the YA demographic, or if this was adult. Not the book's fault, my fault. I will say this book, I had a bit of an unfortunate situation. Oh, and that's that around the page 200 mark, about 20 pages are just blank. So I was reading along quite happily, and then I got to here and I was like, where's the rest of my book? Where is it? So that was a bit of an experience. I had to go to auto and take pictures of the pages and then continue reading. I've never had that before. Absolutely never had that before. I think this book is just gonna have to go in the bin, which feels awful, but I can't give this to charity, because what happens if someone else gets it? And I am going to be unhoarding this because I'm not obsessed with it, and I just feel so bad putting a book in the bin, but I don't know what else I can do with it. Otherwise, towards the end of my final book of the month, then the final book for that vlog, was Middlegame by Shannon McGuire. So this can be read as standalone, is part of the series, but I think I'm just going to leave it as a standalone. It's a very weird book. I think that's just the word that describes how I feel about it is weird. It's set in America. We have this society that is managing things a little bit behind the scenes, and they are creating sort of Frankenstein-esque creations, and 2 of them are these twins called Roger and Dodger, and for these twins they put them out into the world, put them up for adoption, and let these children sort of be raised as normal children. But these children have this power within them. One of them is very skilled in the mathematical sense, and one of them is very skilled in the linguistic languages sense, and it's seeing them as they go through their childhood and sort of come together and realise who they are and what powers they might have. So it was weird. I very much enjoyed it in its weirdness, and I enjoyed the way that it was written, the styling of it, and I liked our characters and the way that we explored them and their lives. But I am also quite happy to just leave it as this sort of standalone. Is not a favourite of all time, and I think for me the first half was stronger than the second half, or the ending where it got a little bit action movie-esque. But overall I enjoyed this. So those were the two of the books that I read in that vlog. There was also another book which I had read previously in June as the first book for that video. It took me a little while to film. I was a bit slow. I took my time because I have to, you know, pace things as a mood reader. Okay, so one of the other books that I just read throughout the month was Not in Love by Ali Hazelwood. This is her latest romance, and I did not realise this, but my nails are like exactly that colour. Like, that is very close to that colour. And so this is her latest romance release. This one is a little bit different to some of her other releases. I know she's been breaking the mold a little bit with things like Bride and Check and Mate, and so she's not been sticking exactly to where she started, which was these quirky STEM romances. And this one does go back to that STEM science setting, and it does have that quirkiness to it, but it's not so light-hearted. And she says that in the beginning note, where she's like, that this isn't like some of my previous books. It's a lot more steamy, very, very steamy, a bit probably more than I would like, but it worked, I guess, for these characters, because I prefer my romances to see the romance and less the steaminess. But overall, I enjoyed seeing our characters. So we follow our main character, Rue, who works at this biotech engineering company, and this company is being acquired by our male love interest, Eli, and it is that awkward dynamic that they meet the night before. This is all announced and have this sort of interaction, and then they find out when it's being presented that the company's been taken over that they know each other, and there's this sort of conflict of interest where she doesn't like that his company is taking over the company that she works for, but she also knows that he seems like a good guy and they've got this chemistry, and it's them sort of going, oh, do we enact on this chemistry that we have, but I don't know if I like you and what you're doing. So I definitely enjoyed that and seeing the twists and turns that played out throughout this. I don't think it was my favourite Ali Hazelwood, but it was fun. It was definitely fun. Then, although for me it's in one book, I've counted it as two, just because my Goodreads goal is still not looking very pretty, and this is like originally marketed, sold as two books, so I have listed it as two, and that is Magician by Raymond Feist. So the first one being Magician Apprentice and the second one being Magician Master. So that's how I have listed it, although I did just read this all the way through and read it as like one book, but you know, I could have listed it as one and listed it as a very long book, which is like 850 odd pages, but I listed it as two like 400 page books. So this is the first book in the Rift War saga, which is like a big epic fantasy world. So you have this quartet trilogy, and then there are multiple other trilogies and series within this world that Raymond Feist has created, sort of similar to the way Robin Hobb or Sanderson have their world that they write within. Raymond Feist has done the same. This is quite an older fantasy work, so it came out in like the 80s. I believe this is actually like the 10-year anniversary revised text edition as well, so it definitely shows its age. And in the first book we're following our main character, Pug, who has a very unfortunate name, and he is sort of like an orphan boy within this castle. He's got a duke and he is trying to find his place there. At the beginning of the book, all of the masters, so like the horseman, the captain of the guard, the healer, they all like pick an apprentice out of the young boys who are turning 14, and our young man Pug gets picked to be the apprentice for the magician, and so he enters into the household in this position, and he's training to learn his skills, and then there's this sort of threat that's rising up that is attacking the kingdom, and so there is a lot of like adventuring and warring, and as they face this threat, it does follow like a multi-perspective story. Like you've got Pug's best friend that you follow, Thomas, and a few other sort of perspectives that get interwoven throughout, and then the sequel, it's even further along in that journey. There are quite a few like time jumps throughout this that you'd just be reading along and then suddenly like, oh, we've gone forward 4 years, okay, we've really like jumped a bit here. I would say for the most part I enjoy these are my like 3.5 3.75 books. I think I preferred there were elements in both of them that I really liked, that I think the first book was stronger in the beginning, that I really enjoyed that cozy like medieval fantasy setting, that it was quite cliche, but at the time it probably wasn't so cliche, because this is probably what people are being inspired by, whereas I've read the inspirations and then reading this, it feels quite cliche, when actually this is the inspiration. So I'd say like the first bit I really enjoyed, like getting introduced into the world and the characters, and then it got a little bit towards the end of the first book, I was like, what? It sort of lost me a little bit. Whereas the second book, the beginning was a little bit like I was in and out, like there were chapters that I was really enjoying and then chapters that I was a bit like, whereas when we got into the second half of the second book, I got really hooked by it. So I'd say there were like ups and downs. There were some chapters that I really liked in this where I was so hooked, where I was like, yes, loving this, really enjoying what's happening with these characters and where it's going. And then other chapters where I was like, you sort of lost me a little bit here. Not so much lost, because I always knew what was going on, just more like my enjoyment ebbed and flowed with it. But there was definitely lots of interesting aspects in this. Like I enjoyed seeing the different cultures that we explored. There were definitely some scenes which showed their age, where I was a bit like, okay, that's not how I would have phrased it. That's not really I don't really like that way that was phrased. But it is like 40 years old, so probably wouldn't have been written like that today if it was being written today. I know that Raymond Feist is still publishing, so I would hope that some of those things wouldn't be in his more recent work. But yeah, there were just a few sentences and phrases and things where I was like, maybe not, maybe not quite the way I would have phrased that. But overall, I enjoyed this, and I do plan to continue on with this and finish out this series. It's nice knowing that the next two books are quite short. They're like 300-400 pages, so they don't feel as daunting as this larger one. And then I am excited as well to read the Daughter of the Empire series that he wrote with Janny Wirtz. I've heard really good things about that series that's a part of this world, and it's supposedly like the second one that you get to after this series. And then the final book, not the final book that I read, because I read this one actually towards the beginning of the month. This is the book that came to Chicago with me on holiday, and that is The Gods Below by Andrea Stewart. This is the start of her new fantasy series, which is releasing in September. So this is an advanced review of this. I really enjoyed this. I really like this one. It feels like a good little while ago since I read it now. I mean, it is, but I did really enjoy this. And I actually met Andrea Stewart in the second half of July, because I was like determined to read this before meeting her. It was like mid-July. So this has been signed by her. Got a nice like bookmark of one of the characters at the event. So it was an event with Andrea Stewart and Tasha Suri and Georgia Summers, who I haven't read anything from. So I really enjoyed this one. It's a multi-perspective story. It's set in this world which 500 or so years ago, the world was dying, and this man goes down to the centre of the earth and says to the gods that live there, please, save our world. And one god listens, and so this god is slowly restoring the world. But as he restores each land, it changes it. So all the people that are there are no longer humans. Like they grow horns and wings and they're changed. And then the land itself is changed as well. And between each land, between each country, there is this barrier that's gone up and has been erected. And so every time that there is a restoration, all the humans are sort of are trying to flee, because either you're changed into these creatures or you just vanish. You're dead. You're gone. You're there's nothing left of you. And so a lot of humans are fleeing into the remaining pockets of sort of the dying land, because they know that if they're at least there, then they will be alive. And so we start off and we're following these two sisters, and they're fleeing one of these restorations. However, one of them gets through the barrier and the other one doesn't. We're then following them 10 years later, where they're both still trying to get back to each other and find each other following these events. And they're sort of on opposing sides of this. That the sister that has been left in the restored lands is really loyal to the god that's doing this, and is supportive of them, whereas the sister that's been in the human lands is not supportive of them and is sort of against what they are doing. And there's lots of twists and turns, sort of heists and adventures along the way. There are also a couple of other perspectives that we're following, but I really enjoyed this. I would definitely recommend it. I had a lot of fun with this. I found it such an interesting world, and I thought that all of our characters were really fleshed out and really well explored. So definitely a little bit different, but similarly to the Bone Shard Daughter series, it has a really interesting like world building, and like that grounding of the world was done really well. So I would definitely recommend this, and would recommend checking this out when it releases in September, so not too long away now. So those are all of the books that I've read over the course of July, and a few of the bits and pieces that I got up to throughout the month. Let me know what your favourite book of July was, and thank you so much for watching, and I will see you in my future videos. Bye!